Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, I'm going to be looking at the latest release from Canonical, and that would, of course, be Ubuntu 21.10, and this will be the desktop version. Well, stay tuned right after this. So recently, Canonical released Ubuntu 21.10, and so I'm going to take an initial look at the desktop, and we'll do a demo. We'll go through the install process as usual. But first, let's talk about a little bit about what the release does and what it offers. It was released on October the 14th of 2021, and the server version is out as well. There are a number of other versions, of course, and there's a number of variants of the Ubuntu so that you can pick whatever desktop environment you prefer. But this will be the 35th release for Canonical for Ubuntu, so it's been a long history of active development. This one is codenamed Impish Indiri, and Impish is sort of a devilish character, and Indiri is a lemur, also called a bavocado. So yeah, that it is. They always pick funny animals and then something silly in front of it, but that's just their code name. We'll know. We'll just talk to as if it's just 2110. 21, of course, is the year, and 10 is the month. The most productive environment, according to Canonical, this is the most productive environment for cloud native developers and artificial intelligence and machine language innovators. So you can develop across for desktop or devices such as IoT devices or the cloud or edge that is meant for that. But it's also a good daily driver as well. The desktop ISO image, which is the installer version of the system, that will be about 3.1 gigabytes. So pretty large release. And this will be supported for about 9 months. So we should see support extend out till July of 2022 of next year. Interim releases are always kind of short lived. The reason for that is they're really meant as a testing point so that we can look at new features that are coming in the LTS release, test them, kick the tires on them, see if we like them, whatever. But the images that are available for this there is, of course, the Intel AMD 64-bit architectures, and those are the default. But you can also find on their pages ISO images for ARM 64, PowerPC 64. If you are using the IBM S390, I believe it is, that would, of course, be a Z series mainframe. There's also images for Raspberry Pi, and those are 64-bit images, and they would also have to be 32 because RPI 30 is 2 and 3 are 32-bit processors, but RPI 4 is a 64-bit. There's also images for RISC-V, and we'll talk about some of the improvements to the kernel, but the support for the RISC-V is limited to the Sci-5 unmatched motherboard. So yeah, so if you wanna install a RISC-V machine, you can do that as well. The kernel that comes shipped with 2110 is updated to 5.13. And I don't want to just gloss over this because 5.13 was a very large release. In fact, I think it's the largest kernel change that has occurred in quite some time. I can't give you an exact number of years, but I can tell you that it's built up from over 16,000 commits from over 2,000 developers. So yeah, it's definitely big. Now, I can't possibly list all of the changes in the kernel. There are a huge number, but let's talk about some of the highlights. So the first thing is that this kernel, 5.13, provides what they describe, the kernel team describes as a support release. So it's a cursory, it's initial, and this will be to support the Apple M1 chipset. Now, does that mean I can go out and just stick Ubuntu 2110, for example, on a Apple ARM M1, well, ARM-based M1 chipset? No. It just means that they have started to build into the things that you're going to need in order to be able to boot from it. It's a long way from being a standalone release, and that's what we're talking about. You can run Ubuntu today in a virtual machine on Mac OS, of course. So remember, it has to be an ARM. The other new feature is Landlock. That's a security module that is similar to SE Linux and AppArmor, but one of the big changes with it is it allows SE Linux and AppArmor to run in as a stack. So you can sort of layer these different security modules on. Now, of course, just like SE Linux, the Landlock is really meant to intercept syscalls and then make sure that the caller is legitimate and that the syscall is going to the right place. It can be used alongside SE Linux or AppArmor, and it can also, but it also uses keys uh, other than from a TPM chip. And so you probably remember I talked about TPM. Originally, it was meant for the secure environment, and that is a governmental classification for a particular type of server platform environment. So it was never really developed for widespread use. And so I kind of question why people are starting to use TPM other than, I guess, because the motherboard manufacturers have made it so ubiquitous and made it available on the motherboards. I just wonder at the wisdom of that decision, but I could be wrong, and I hope I am. So it also adds mainline support for software interrupt processing. So that is a pretty large performance kick, and that comes from the real-time Linux kernel. It means that all software interrupts are being handled by the kernel thread handler, which is good. I mean that you don't if you had it out in user land, you would be generating syscalls every time you used it. So it's good that that is now inside. There's some changes that have occurred for all of the file systems, but I'm just going to pick on ext4. And one of the big changes there is it now supports Vitrim, which is IO control. It allows you to batch up the system discards. So, in other words, it's a Ware leveling system that is used to help uh, provide longevity for SSDs and NVMe drives. Some toolchain updates. So glibc is 2.3.4 now. That's a minor update. OpenJDK is a pretty major jump. That went from, I think the last release was version 11, and this one is version 18. GCC 11 and Rust-C 1.51. That's another minor update for Rust-C. Python has been bumped from, I think, 3.8 to 3.9. And then PHP went from 7.4 to 8. Perl is a minor bump, 5.32, and Golang 1.17. There's a number of utilities as well that are in this release, and so this is Ubuntu's first introduction into Pulse Audio, and they have chosen version 15 for that. And yeah, so hopefully that'll help you test and get familiar with using Pulse Audio to replace some of the other audio handlers within Linux. NF Tables is now the default backend firewall. So it is replacing IP tables, but there is a compatibility layer with IP tables. So if you have scripts that are set up to use IP tables, those will, of course, still work. Desktop is based on GNOME 40, and of course, GNOME 41 is the current release, but Canonical has changes that they make to Ubuntu. So yeah, they're in order to keep those changes in the build, it takes them a little longer to once they get a release or a release candidate of GNOME 40 or whatever GNOME version they're going to choose for their distributions. It takes them some time to get their changes put in. And, I know that they get criticism for that, but that's okay. I mean, they have made some decisions in order to supply features that aren't in other GNOME releases, and it's either the features aren't built in, then you're going to the extension pools, and that's not always a good thing. The other thing that GNOME 40 brings, of course, is NVIDIA support under Wayland. And so if you are using an NVIDIA graphics card with the proprietary drivers from NVIDIA, yeah, Wayland will support it. Now, I don't know how well. I haven't done any testing on my NVIDIA systems, so I don't know how well it will work. There are also dynamic workspaces now, and there's some additional hotkeys that allow you to easily switch back and forth between workspaces. So it should help improve your workflow a little bit. There's also touchpad gesture support. So things that you're familiar with, if you're used to using a touchpad on Windows or on a Mac, you'll find that kind of environment familiar. There's also new desktop layouts and themes that are available for this release as well. Firefox version 93 is the default, and that is a snaps version. What we're going to try today, though, I know that some people object to snaps. Snaps does take some time in order to start up on the first incantation of a application that's running in Snap. But after that, subsequent launches while you're up under that particular use or under session are quicker because it's already preloaded everything that you need. However, I did see that there is a deb package for Firefox, and so what I'll do today is I'll just see if I can uninstall the Snap version and put the deb version out and see if we crater the release. I don't think that will happen, but if you object to using Snap, you can always replace it, and we'll find out if that's possible. LibreOffice Suite is version 7.2 and Thunderbird version 91.1.2, and that is a deb package. It is not a Snap. BlueZ version 5.6. So some of the other features for this release, if you are using the OCI build environments, which of course is the Open Cloud Initiative, those images are available on Docker Hub and on Amazon ECR Public Registry. Now, one thing I noticed, I said that Docker is not included in the base repo. That is no longer true. So when I tested this a few days ago and was playing around with it, I did not see Docker in the repos. That has been corrected. Docker is back and it is part of the repos. So it could have been an oversight on my part, or it might have been an oversight on their part, but they are definitely in the repos. Podman is included in the base releases as well. It's not installed, but it's there. And of course, that is the preferred environment now for Kubernetes. So, as my understanding, Micro K8 installs Kubernetes with a single command. And that's been some changes and some improvements that Canonical has been making to that environment. It takes 2 commands in order to create a cloud or an edge cluster. So, yeah, pretty nice. And that should ease some of the burden in the workflow to try to get Kubernetes established in a cloud environment. To support a cloud environment, let's put it that way. File system ZFS boot uses OpenZFS 2.0.6. Now, the current version of OpenZFS is 2.1.1, I believe, at the time that I'm doing this video. So, but you know, that's a patch release, and of course, if you want the newer one, you can always download it, install it. Some other features is in the artificial intelligence machine language innovation category is Apache Cassandra is now a Snap package. And they're also working with NVIDIA to provide virtual GPU support for KVM. Now that's KVM running under Ubuntu. So, and that can share, of course, physical GPUs with multiple VMs. Now, I don't know, or I would rather doubt, but I don't know if that will support the classical, gamers graphics card. Typically, those are not shareable because there's only one set of execution streams that work in those. So it may require one of the server-based cards that has multiple GPU support in them. Multiple virtual GPU support where you can actually divide the card up and use it among multiple guests. But I don't know. I haven't played with that yet, so I'm kind of looking forward to doing that in the future. So I'll probably do another video when we get to that point. There's other enhancements to 5.13 I didn't mention that have application to Ubuntu, and that is Kfence. So kfence is it's a runtime memory error detector, but it does something else, and this is kind of interesting. So when you make a system call in Linux, it always puts a return stack pointer on the stack, so that when that particular system call returns, it knows what part of the code to branch back to. Every time you do a system call in with kfence will relocate the stack in memory. So yeah, so it kind of makes it a moving target as syscalls come in, it's moving around. And the reason for that is so that a potential uh, agent for evil, or if somebody that is trying to hack into your system using known locations of memory for your stack, won't be able to insert and change the return pointer that was just placed on the stack. Hopefully that will minimize it. So that is the reason behind it. Now, they say, they being the kernel team, says that kfence has very low overhead and doesn't appreciably change the amount of time it takes to complete a syscall. But as with all things security, I have yet to see security improve performance. So, yeah, you might be at parity, you might be a little bit slower. So, yeah, 2110 is the final interim release before the 2022 long-term release is available, and that of course has a name already, and that, as I understand it, is Jammy Jellyfish, and that's scheduled currently for April of 2022. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop and I'll come back, and let's go see what the install is like, and we'll play around with the release a little bit. We'll see if we can get Firefox installed as a package versus a snap. Okay, so I have my usual setup here where I'm using 4 gigabytes of memory, 4 processors, 32 gig of disk on Proxmox to install this. So nothing different here. I am running this under legacy BIOS mode today. And yeah, we'll go in and do an install and follow the process. There is one place that is a change, which is right here. If you are installing this in a UEFI environment and you select the install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, it will have additional information it will want from you. And the reason for that is really to protect you from some third-party have been known to inject malware. So if you select that, it allows you to put a password on it so that someone later can't just inject malware in your system through the third-party vector. So you'll have to provide that. That's something new in this release of Ubuntu that wasn't there in the previous versions. But it does not do that on a legacy BIOS. So some of the features we have is I can use an LVM that allows me then to encrypt, or I can erase the disk and use ZFS, which now also supports encryption if I choose to do that. So either one of those two will allow you to encrypt your drive. Now, of course, it's only encrypted while it's down or offline. So yeah, once you've started up the system, you're decrypting your drive. So I'm not going to do anything special. I'm just going to let it install everything onto a single partition. And my time zone is Chicago. That's right. We'll go ahead and enter a user ID. And we'll call it D for desktop, not for me. Okay. Got that entered, and then we'll go ahead and let it install. This will take some time, and so I don't know if there's any other questions it's going to ask me. I don't think so. I think at this point it will just take off on its own. So it's finished, and it's ready for me to click to restart. It took some time. But it's not bad. So I'll go ahead and just restart this. And then they always stop, and you'll want, if you're, especially if you're on hardware and you're using like one of these, you'll want to, this is an SD reader. It has a USB key on the other side. So you'll want to remove it at this point, of course. Now, if you're on a VM, it will automatically, it automatically has the boot drive ahead of the CD-ROM anyway. So it should just boot off the disk. And then it's asking me to connect to any of my online accounts. I'm not going to do that. I don't, this is probably, this is the same thing as, I think, popularity contest and privacy. No, thank you. And then it tells you that these, now everything in the store is a snap package, just so you understand that. But if you install with apt or dpackage, of course it is not. One of the nice things about this is that it does automatically recognize when I am expanding the window and allows me to select the, that's nice. I like that. So it doesn't look appreciably different from previous releases other than, of course, the desktop art. But this is totally different. So you'll notice that if you remember the video I did on Fedora 34, that this is one of the big changes is that you can then switch easily between it. Now there are shortcut keys that allow you to do this faster, but and that's good. That came up to tell you that. I'm gonna do this from the command line so that, yeah, I'm not gonna do that from here. All right, so let's go ahead, look through here a little bit. There's some advanced networking configuration. That is really the same thing as this. You have the Gnome video player, some games, also the backup manager as well. So there's terminal, this, yes, some more settings, more games. So I suppose what we should do is go look at settings. So one of the things that on appearance that have changed is that, remember they used to have an interim step between where you had dark but then light mixed in with it. Well, now you only get a choice between dark and light, which I think is fine. I mean, that's fine. You can also auto hide the dock. This used to be like the dash to dock extension that's now built in. And so I can then position this. I'm going to put this on if I can get a hold of it. Come here. Okay. Push this onto the bottom. Now I don't see a way to reposition that, but maybe in some future release they'll add that. And then if you want to auto hide the dock, you can turn that on so that then when you cursor down, it should come back up, should come back up, should come back up, come back up. No, it doesn't look like it's gonna. So I'll go ahead and turn that back off. And so one thing I still don't see in here is it would be nice to have the kernel version listed, but I don't see it. Now they do show what version of Gnome I'm running, but I don't see the kernel version. It'd be nice if they would add that. So maybe in some future release. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this up. Go down here to my profile and I'll select a little sluggish. At least it's probably not them, it's probably me. And then we'll turn off that. Actually, I don't need to do anything. I can just leave that alone. Since the system is controlling it from the display manager, I'm just going to leave that alone. First thing is first. You can type today. Oh, or any day for that matter. It's the keyboard's fault. Really, it's the keyboard's fault. One update. And So I'm going to go ahead and reboot because I want a clean memory footprint and see how much memory this is actually taking before I do it. We'll expand this back out. Okay, so htop I don't think is installed by default. No, it isn't. So let me use top before we execute anything. So out of 4 gig, we're using about 686 meg. It fluctuated. It jumped for a minute there to 700. Not too bad. Not too bad, considering what Gnome used to take in the past, upwards of a gig. So yeah, they've definitely trimmed it down. And I know that 41 trims it down a little bit more. So, all right, let's go ahead. Let's get all my toys out here. I don't think Git is installed either. All right. We'll just confirm. 731, of course, I have been running some apps, so every time you do that, the app cache goes up just a little bit, and so does the file cache. Let's see. Wow, 1,655 packages and 8 snaps are installed. Now, and I think in times past, they allowed you to install a minimal version, and I think there was an option for that on the main install on the Calamari. So if you don't want all this stuff, just select the minimal, and then you can pick which applications that you want. So, but it'll start you out with at least enough to be able to add stuff that you might need. So the kernel is 5.13. That was last compiled on the 15th, so fairly recent update. And we'll see how much disk it's taking. Yeah. Well, now I did install some stuff, so, but not that much. 8.4 gig. I think the base release is pretty close to 8 gig to start with. So, yeah, it is growing definitely, but tell me what isn't. Software always expands. I've never seen software contract over time. That just doesn't happen. Go ahead and get this out here. And we'll run through it and we'll just see what our score is for hardening. Score of a 66. That's exactly the same as Debian. So not a big surprise. And yeah, this is the culprit that will really knock you down. There's no, and the rest of it though, let me just peek through here. Yeah, all these are pretty much standard. Once if you have Ansible or if you have Puppet or Chef or something like that, you can set up a script, or even just if you just write a bash script and just have it do all the default tasks for you, at least get you to a small state of hardening. So yeah, we have Firefox as a snap right there. I don't see anything else in here though, other than, there's some core functions that are snaps. So if I remember right, well, let's just see. I think it's remove. Yeah, okay, so probably need to be sudo. And we'll just blow the snap away. I guess what I should have done was launch it, But yeah, it is going to be slower because it has to build a container. So, but once it's done that, everything's fine. So you can see that my browser has disappeared down there. So add-ons for Firefox. Yeah, 9.3, and that is a Debian package. So a deb package. So yeah, so far, let's see if we can replace it and see if it actually works once we've done that. Okay, and then we'll just slide it up. And there you go. Okay, so yeah, it works. It works fine. So I guess if you don't want the snap version, you can just install the deb. And you could also do Flatpak or whatever else you might want to do in place of it if you don't like that. The reason behind having containers isn't so much for security, although there is a slight security layer it provides. The real advantage to things like snaps and app image is that it brings in its own library support environment so that it isn't, you're not going to get into that problem that you could have if you have applications with different support libraries. Particularly if they're dynamic libraries is typically where you run into that problem. Now if they're static libraries, they're compiled into the code base, so not likely that you would have conflict there. But the dynamic libraries, yeah, you can run into conflict. I'll put some links down below as to what the changes are in all the full list of changes in 5.13. But most of the changes in here are having to do with the system itself, updating the different tools, and also providing you with Gnome 40. Ubuntu is a good place to start if you're looking to come to Linux for the very first time. It's a good place to. It's a friendly environment. The people that are supporting it are really nice. So if you're looking to come into the Linux from Windows, maybe you're tired of all the spying and maybe your hardware isn't going to up to snuff to be able to run version 11 of Windows. Ubuntu is, as of the last survey I saw, and it was released a couple of days ago, actually, by Steam. Ubuntu is the most popular platform for Linux and gaming. So, if you are looking to come over from Windows and you are a gamer, now your experience, I'm not a gamer, so I can't tell you how well your experience with all of the games are going to be, but I can tell you that it's getting better. So that's all I know for sure. I hope you enjoyed this today, Ubuntu 2110. Just remember that it is an interim release. This is meant for us to kick the tires and get to know the new features that will probably be coming in the new LTS. So hope to see you again in the next video. Please like and subscribe and take care and bye for now.